check your bank account first thing in the morning. Maybe the number is good, maybe it isn't. Either way, something shifts inside you. A tightness in the chest, a quiet hum of anxiety or relief. And before you've even had coffee, money has already decided how your day is going to feel. That reaction feels completely natural, like it's just how things are. But what if it isn't? What if everything you believe about wealth, what it is, what it does, what it means, is fundamentally, provably wrong, not slightly off, not a matter of opinion, wrong in a way that philosophers figured out thousands of years ago, that modern science has confirmed over and over again, and that almost nobody actually lives by? Here's where it starts. You were taught, probably very early, that money equals security, and security equals happiness. So if you just had enough, a little more than you have right now, everything would feel okay. You'd stop worrying. You'd start living. That's not a personal belief. It's a script. And it was handed to you by a culture that has been running the same script for centuries. The ancient Greeks had a word for it, pleonexia. It means the insatiable desire for more. Aristotle wrote about it in the 4th century BCE. He watched wealthy men in Athens, men with more than they could ever spend their entire lives acquiring more. Not because they needed it, because the wanting had become the point. The accumulation had replaced the living. Aristotle called this a kind of madness, not a moral failing, a philosophical error, a confusion about what money actually is and what it can actually do. He made a distinction that almost nobody makes today. He separated what he called crematistics, the art of money-making, from oikonomia, which is where the word economy comes from, and which literally means the management of a household, a life, a set of genuine needs. Crematistics, he argued, is limitless by nature. There is no ceiling on how much you can want. But oikonomia has a natural limit, because actual human needs have a natural limit. The problem is that most people spend their lives playing a game with no finish line, and then wonder why they never feel like they've won. Now shift forward about 4 centuries. A man named Lucius Annaeus Seneca is writing letters from Rome. He is one of the wealthiest men in the empire. He has more than he could spend in 100 lifetimes. And he is writing, with unusual honesty, about how little it matters. In one letter, Seneca describes what he calls the poverty of abundance, the idea that the more you have, the more clearly you see what having doesn't give you. He writes to his friend Lucilius that most men are tormented not by poverty, but by the memory of poverty, or the fear of it returning. And that fear, he says, is not a financial problem. It is a mental one. This is not Stoic detachment for its own sake. Seneca wasn't saying money doesn't matter. He was saying your relationship with money is doing the work that money itself cannot do. You're asking a number in an account to tell you that you're safe, that you're worthy, that you've made it. And numbers can't do that. No number is ever large enough to carry that weight. The Epicureans, who are almost always misunderstood, said something similar from a completely different angle. Epicurus was not, despite what most people assume, a philosopher of indulgence. He lived in a garden on the outskirts of Athens with a small group of friends. He ate bread and olives. He drank water. And he wrote that the greatest source of human suffering is not poverty, but the false belief about what we actually need. He identified 3 categories of desire: natural and necessary desires, food, shelter, friendship, health; natural but unnecessary desires, fancier food, a bigger house, status symbols; and vain desires, the ones with no natural limit, the ones culture manufactures and money chases. His argument was that the first category is cheap and easy to satisfy, and that almost all human financial anxiety is generated by the second and third. You don't need to read philosophy to feel this. You felt it. You buy something you wanted for months, and within days the wanting is already somewhere else. Psychologists call this hedonic adaptation. The baseline always returns. The new car stops feeling new. The promotion stops feeling like a promotion. The number that once seemed like enough starts feeling like not enough. In 2010, the Nobel Prize winning psychologist Daniel Kahneman and economist Angus Deaton published a landmark study on income and emotional well-being. They analyzed data from 450,000 Americans and found that day-to-day emotional well-being, how good or bad you feel on a given Tuesday, plateaus at around $75,000 in annual income. Beyond that point, more money did not produce more positive emotion in daily life. Life evaluation, how you judge your life overall, kept climbing. But that's a story you tell yourself about your life, not the actual texture of living it. Kahneman would later revisit this number, and more recent research has complicated the picture somewhat, but the core finding has held up across cultures and methodologies. There is a point of sufficiency beyond which more wealth does not proportionally improve how your life actually feels, and almost everyone, regardless of where they fall on the income scale, believes they are just below that point. That is not a coincidence. That is a system working exactly as designed. Consider what philosopher Michael Sandel has called the market logic of life. Over the last few decades, the logic of buying and selling has expanded far beyond the market. It has moved into education, healthcare, relationships, self-worth. We now evaluate almost everything, including ourselves, in financial terms. Net worth has become a synonym for actual worth. The language of investment, return, and value has colonized how we think about time, friendship, and meaning. And when that happens, the question, what is enough, becomes nearly impossible to answer, because the market has no concept of enough. The market only knows more. The Stoics had a practice for this. They called it negative visualization, or what Seneca described as the premeditation of evils. The practice was simple and strange. Regularly imagine losing everything you have, not to make yourself afraid, but to interrupt the adaptation, to taste the food you've stopped tasting because you're used to it, to feel the warmth of the house you stopped noticing. The goal wasn't to pretend wealth doesn't matter. It was to free yourself from the tyranny of the next thing, to reclaim what you already have. The philosopher Epicurus, who was born a slave and spent his life without wealth, wrote that the rich man is not the one who has much, but the one who wants little. That line is easy to dismiss as the philosophy of someone who didn't have a choice. But Epicurus wasn't talking about poverty. He was talking about freedom. The freedom that comes from knowing the difference between what you need and what you've been told to need. None of this is an argument against ambition. It is not a case for poverty or passivity. It is something more precise than that. It is an argument that the way most people relate to money, anxious, comparative, insatiable, ashamed, is not a product of their financial situation. It is a product of a philosophy they've absorbed without realizing it. A set of assumptions so embedded in the culture that they feel like facts. They called it the poverty of abundance, and they spent their whole lives trying to get free of it. Maybe it's time you did too.